Futility is a very powerful weapon. When we speak of Gaza, we speak of not only the colossal abomination visited on innocent people in residential neighborhoods. We also speak of the enormous sums of money that were made by Israel and their supporters. It is a traffic in futility and the politics of war coming in the form of Las Vegas. For me personally, having grown up in a Zionist Holocaust survivor neighborhood where museum thieves were protected by the FBI, I heard a great deal about the way that they think and know that futility has been identified by them as a powerful weapon for psychological warfare. In the 60s, opposing the Vietnam War, Humphrey and Nixon were running in 1968. Both favored the war, so enlightened people braced themselves to resist whoever won. The same shameful state of affairs exists in America with regard to Gaza and Israel. I believe that there were things which weren't understood in the 60s that were kept quiet even by the left for nefarious reasons. For example, France, who we rescued in Vietnam, whose project of colonialism we rescued in Vietnam, were the Vichy French. They were allies of the Japanese in Vietnam in World War II. So it was the reassertion of the Axis powers in Vietnam through an American fascist wing operating primarily from the state of Texas. I don't know that any enlightenment can be found for the young generation, Generation Z, and so on, concerning Gaza because of the success in rendering the investigation into AIDS as an attack utterly futile. Nobody even recognizes that it took place openly. Still, it's worth the trouble to explain what really happened. In an attempt to do that, I suppose it's a good idea to begin with blindfolds and masks. People who are covered in blindfolds face people who are covered in masks. Sometimes, in fact, blindfolds can be a mask, and masks can be a blindfold, meaning you allow yourself to be deceived or you pretend you're with someone you aren't. Now, America has suffered inordinately from the Red Scare on, from Hollywood's era of John Wayne on, from the concept that Russia liked of Christian cowboys. Cowboys were kept Christian by the good woman, the little woman in the kitchen, which means and makes the bleeding of tunes like Southern Man, inherently homosexual. Swearing off fighting was considered conduct unbecoming. True, there were a few crackerjacks in the garages of the East End of Pittsburgh who could put aside these fine points and become maniacal perverts in the name of Roy Rogers. But in opening the tumblers of Family Day readers in Dorothy Thompson's generation, Dorothy Thompson was a female war reporter who delved into the psychological warfare practices and orientations of Germany. We arrive at the specific cultural turning points that the FBI was 50s was all about. Romantic to some, few are willing to share their secrets of values to prime time anymore. Radio traffic crossed the radar wires somewhere one step beyond Citizens Band. But not all was black boxed. Instead, the interlopers played moral code. Marvel comic villain insisting on removing the blindfold or the mask at the moment of maximum treachery and show it only to the person that they hated most. You may not like hearing this, but Barry Goldwater was a folk hero, a real hero as well. This is shown by how heartbroken he was as the news of JFK arrived. While all around him others were grinning like grave robbers. He must have been a real Dorothy Thompson man. And that is the whole point. Because Hitler Reagan made himself at home, banging on as if the road warrior in the blank end, wiping its feet on the red carpet provided Barry Goldwater. He emerged from his film The Killers to stump for Goldwater's candidacy. A man who was soon gone, a relic in obscurity. It's important to understand that those who conspired saw him as an invisible trophy. They had fooled him. Lee Marvin's unforgettable Jerry Lewis death scene, The Killers, came on the heels of Hitler Reagan robbing a safe. He knew the tumblers. Now, even bankrupt, bankers make many decisions, but their followers of economic traffic did not entertain the great dictators so as to extend them a warm welcome quite as readily as the bankers. Men like Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Goldwater. understood that they had stomped Hitler in good cause. So Sinatra's cadre in Vegas, the Rat Pack they were called, strike forth to deceive them, outfox them, maneuver, and put on, with the help of similarly face ladies' club people like Phyllis Schlafly and Victoria Nuland, deceive the sincerity of women like Dale Rogers. The sincerity of Dale Rogers and Barry Goldwater must not be regarded as an anomaly. The difference between conformity and sincerity drives NATO and the FBI and Congress mad with distraction. They can't focus anymore when sincerity is present during the demands of conformity. It drives them mad to see what can be done to remedy the situation. The Clintons, of course, have always just been clowny acts, from the Rod Serling antenna TV culture, and their concept of My Favorite Martian comes up like the antenna from Barack Obama's spinner beanie. For them, sincerity doesn't mean anything. It's not important to Tim Kaine, for example, that I am a personal injury, so battered, so traumatized, so compound, that it's conspicuous and embarrassing to almost everybody. Parkinson's, deafness, neurotrauma being experimented on, tortured, lied to, left homelessness, attacked sexually on the job by race perverts working with Zionists who were robbing the museum. It means nothing to Tim Kaine because the idea of remedy is rooted in the idea of sincerity, which lies destroyed in Gaza. That means nothing to them. To the Clintons, the only moral code is the one that wins in Las Vegas, and that is the bottom line. Jesus, for these black people of the NAACP and UW Dialectical, just means Las Vegas. That's all it means. Midori Goto, a bloodthirsty Ripper Hatter, is still stalking me with the lust for satisfaction in getting a Vegas narrative of forgiveness for mass genocidal murderers. That's her kick. That's her fad. And she is a trendsetter in that all through Seattle's Generation Z at these Gaza clubs. It's like Thos Gordon, magna cum of Harvard, liked to gloat that Loki was put in a tree and he could only be freed if he made someone cry. And his only way to make someone cry would be by trickery. That's what they think is all that is left of Jimmy Crary. David Cohen had an explanation for why on Superstar and how and culturally Judas became an adjective. He told me, "Oh, you liar, you Jimmy, see how it works?" The futility of Judas is considered by the FBI and NATO their trump in the deck of what Hitler Reagan really pulled with John Lennon. Wholesome girls like Dale Rogers were just believers that there was a difference between America. We would never side with Hitler. That was the bottom line. But what happened was that Reagan tricked everybody by sleight of hand with the help of John Lennon. Now, you try to keep in mind that Eisenhower stopped the Korean War, and he didn't take any lip from Israel. He was not going to be pulled into a genocide by Israeli shrinks selling that they loved King Crimson's fairy collection. They weren't, he wasn't a moral gyrationist trying to balance the debt ledger of the military industrial complex loans to every enemy in sight. The futility of Judas is not something you usually hear applied to Eisenhower. My father knew Eisenhower, and yet they've come to apply it to me. What's wrong with them? The hair and the left do it too. What happened is that they, even though most of them were like Dale Rogers and Barry Goldwater, they wouldn't have tolerated. Even NATO and the FBI, a lot of them would not have tolerated knowingly going along with Hitler. So they had to deceive themselves. And upon learning to be deceived, that they were deceived, they've been caught with their pants down. Maybe the Reagan people are better than the hair people after all, because when the hair people are caught with their pants down, they just start screaming and shrieking like Choctaw Indian war parties, Ripper Hatters with battle axes, demanding to enforce their self-deception. The Reagans, caught with their pants down, might pull them up and make attempts to salvage their own names. But the truth is the truth. We've become a society that has abandoned the intelligent design of our perceptions and principles. We can't acknowledge that sustainability's in future for civilization in a tortured, poisoned, threatened environment is the Chinese idea of the Belts and Roads Project. Intelligent design has gone the way instead of comic book art about genocide, which is what Gail Berson's letters made of the AIDS attack. And what they're trying to convince us is that Gaza is just another story in the genocide genre. They have cry drones. They come around sounding like babies, and then when someone comes to investigate, shoots them, whether they're a man, a woman, or a child. How hard do you think it was for the Pittsburgh NAACP to find a pornographic actress to force me to consent to her attentions and then play a weepy? It was a swimsuit. It was a sure thing for the Jesus Las Vegas crowd. And what they have in poisoning me is a low-key samizdat story. What does that mean? In Russia, it was legal to write your views, but if your views exchanged hands, you could be arrested. So anybody who exchanged views was called a samizdat writer, which meant free speech rebel or resistance to censorship. What the NAACP has accomplished with the Zionists in Pittsburgh is, while they concede that a person has a right to self-defense, you don't have the right to be a threat. So if they torture you and surround you, they have black intellectuals who claim that Namibia was violated by Germany. And this doesn't have anything to do with preserving the history, making clear the nature of racism. It's just an attempt to loot the situation for Shifty, who's just changing the subject and making it out that anybody who is white has violated the plan of action which went into the cry drones. Because if Israel can make cry drones of babies and then start shooting people, how can you be sure that TikTok isn't making a cry drone of Namibia? There's nothing to say that it's unreasonable to document what happened in Namibia. It is unreasonable to cover up the NAACP's role in attack, prostitution, Two Virgins Pussy Bowl, the AIDS attack, and torturing me by changing the subject for Shifty, whose only goal in morality is to win at the Jesus Las Vegas. This is perfectly obvious from the voodoo of Yoko Ono in all of it. What happened was they pretended to find letters about people they pretended were victims of assassination and assassination attempts. It was a crime that was set up from a long time ago. So the record book about it is perfectly clear and easily documented in the classic cinema from which it emerged. It was a takeover of the human consciousness of what is real, put on by plastic reality warriors who saw it as a challenge. Houdini, because it was there. And the byproduct of this is perfectly tangible by the fact that the people who rode the coattails of Martin Luther King, like Jesse Jackson and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, are rubbing in our faces a genocide in Gaza as though it is the work of our forefathers in social progress, which means nothing to Shifty because of Namibia. The bottom line is that we have to understand that genocide is the crime of all crimes. It's not a genre. It's not something that we stand for. It's not something that people like Barry Goldwater stood for. We are not all Adolf Hitler. We are not all either in the axis of genocide or the axis of resistance. Some of us are interested in public education and public welfare and sustainable development, in the abolition of genocide. Can anybody even say that? Absolutely not. Why? Because of Mick Jagger, Yoko Ono, and Ringo Starr. Don't fool yourself. David Bowie's Diamond Dogs was about the script of Gail Burstyn, who appears on a record from 1979 by one of John Lennon's best friends, Robert Fripp. And you will never get anywhere denying that I was tortured by these Ripper Hatters and coming forward with a Jesus Vegas that, as usual, is saying we have a drop of contaminated blood, which will set you straight about Allah.